Sorry.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arhana Dubey, and today I will be your timekeeper. Before we continue, I would just like to confirm that this is Team B, correct?
Yeah.
All right. I will show you the warning signs when there are 10, 5, 2, and 30 seconds with this time signal. And I would like to remind everyone in the room that all teams must present for a minimum of 15 minutes, and all team members must speak during the presentation, but not necessarily during the Q&A period. Audience members, we ask you to please place your phones on silent mode and remain seated in the room for the duration of the presentation and the Q&A period. I will now let the judges introduce themselves. Once they are done, you may begin your presentation, and the timer will start when you're ready. So, judges, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Meet the Marcus.
I'm Brody. I work with Nesto Cloud.
Ron Schwartz, angel investor and corporate director.
Mark Brandon, business transformation person.
All right. The timer will start whenever you're ready.
Bonjour et bienvenue. Hello and welcome. We are Lead Consulting, and we are so excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today. Last year, my family moved into a new house. This was a really exciting experience for us, but I remember my parents had such issues with the approvals process. It went on for so long. At the same time, Oisín was working in a bank. He was dealing with the other side, having to do all of this extra paperwork that could have been solved. It's these personal experiences that make us extra passionate about our solutions here today to help grow Nesto Cloud. From acceleration through AI. Before we get started, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to my fantastic team. My name is Kate, this is Oisín, Ellen and Dylan, and as you can see behind us, we come from a broad range of business backgrounds. We have experience in...
I said we'll just use the keypad if it's not. Well, if we're having technical difficulties like this, you can see why banks definitely need a company like Nesto Cloud to kind of come in and sort a few issues.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay. All right. The timer.
It said just use the keypad.
Yeah, I'll do this. Okay, just to reintroduce you to my team. My name is Kate, this is Oisín, Ellen and Dylan, and as you can see behind me, we come from a broad range of business backgrounds. We have expertise in information systems, operations and finance, making us the perfect team to deliver a really comprehensive solution to you today. So before we get started, I'd like to give you a quick summary of what we're going to be talking about today. So our main goal here is to grow Nesto Cloud as an ecosystem growth platform. We looked at some key questions here in order to develop 3 strong and implementable solutions for you. Firstly, we're going to be looking at improving the AI technology. Dylan has expertise in this and is going to bring you through this really comprehensively in order to create an impact of 40 to 60% increased efficiency and also additional risk aversion benefits. We'll then be looking at a targeted sales strategy. Oisín will bring you through this, how we'll be able to really improve how many financial institutions that Nesto Cloud is going to be onboarding within the next year, aiming to onboard 6 additional lender clients in 2026. Finally, we'll be looking at the post-sales servicing plan and also co-marketing activities in order to make sure that we can increase our benefits for both Nesto Cloud and the financial institutions, ensuring continued platform use. I'll now hand you over to Ellen to bring you through a company analysis.
So at the moment, Nesto Cloud faces a challenging landscape, but it has several opportunities. At the moment, it's highly competitive with several key industry players such as nCino and ICE and Compass, offering really comprehensive banking digital platforms for firms to use nowadays. There are also evolving regulatory changes, which means that renewal no longer requires requalification, and this makes it a highly competitive landscape for renewals, as it's now easier when requiring less effort for firms to switch lenders. And also we've friction associated with changing partners. With the confidentiality of data, it poses several issues for our firms to access and partner with these financial firms. We also have several strengths with the reduced operational costs that their SaaS system provides. with their improved customer experience and their cohesive implementation model, which is driven through their post-servicing plans, which makes it incredibly easy and efficient for firms to adopt this technology and use it to benefit their clients. And when we look at the opportunities, we have 65% of mortgages that were either to be renewed in 2025 or are set to be renewed in 2026, which with the new legislation means that it would be easier for firms to switch to a company using Nesto. And many Canadians are now pursuing shorter term renewals, and this makes it more competitive and more opportunity for loan origination. And there's a greater need for technology for firms in order to reduce the technology cost, and this makes it easier for firms to adopt this and make the implementation very easy for the firm. I'll now pass you on to Dylan to speak through our key industry players.
Yeah, so look, in this market we have three key industry players. We have the traditional banks, which have 65% of all mortgage organisations in 2025, the credit unions and the alternative lenders, and finally the fintechs. But us, we're directing it straight towards the traditional banks because we have the biggest market here. And if we're to look at the key competitors here, it's NCINO, which is an integrated banking platform, does process automations, but they are not targeting the traditional banking. Similarly to ICE and Compass, it's known for its robust compliance features, its digital orientation, and the final competitor that we have is the Q2 cloud lending infrastructure for the banks and the unions and fintechs. I'm going to pass you on to Kate now, or Oisin now, to talk with the target customers.
Yeah, so I suppose, when we're looking at the, Nesto and the idea of what we want to do with it, you have to start with who we want to do it with. Now, I had worked in a large bank back home, as part of my course, and I got first-hand experience with the old systems and the transition to the nCino platform, actually. And so I know for a fact that big banks need the change. And up on the slides here, I kind of have the contrast between perhaps going for smaller banks, going for bigger banks, or different credit institutions. And what we're proposing today is that Nesto kind of follow the big and medium-sized issuers, because if you go with small banks, and if you're successful at attracting customers, you'll end up with, say, 50 new clients with 50 new systems. You go for one big bank, same size, you end up with one system. So if you just bring it back to basic economics, you're talking about scale here. You're going to have the developers going through 50 systems or one system, and anybody can take the idea of which you'd like to do. So that's just kind of a simple idea why kind of target the medium, the bigger issuers, and of course then later on, then perhaps in the partnership we can start talking about the residential side, the brokerage business, and putting that through again. Scale and size is where you really want to be, and that's why medium, large institutions would be our kind of target customers. And one or two examples of that, and we'll see how this kind of feeds into the rest of our strategy later on, is Van City in Vancouver, and Lorient Bank as well, out this side of the coast. Both about 40-50 billion in CAD in terms of assets. There's one or two other particular things about these companies. Van City in particular, I'll talk about this in a minute. Again, the current CEO, is former VP of Ops, and I'll bring into that in a second. And Lorient Bank, well, they're having transformation issues, and again, just reinforcing the idea that the bigger institutions, medium-sized institutions, is where our kind of customers and target market would lie. So in that sense, I want to bring you to how the company currently kind of goes from a top-down perspective with regards to sales, targeting the CEO and working down then into the implementation. What I'd like to propose is that we actually go sideways. So we start with the ops managers, the operations teams. Like, these are like the guys running the show essentially, right? It's like the student ambassadors here, nothing would happen without them. It's the same idea here. But the difference is these guys understand the issues. I know that the executives, when I was working, I know the executives didn't care about the technology because they weren't the ones dealing with it. They push it down to the guys like me at the bottom of the ladder who have to manually put in this, put in the time, waste the effort on unnecessary things that, as Dylan will take us through on later, can be fixed, with the Nesto platform. So that's why we'd like to go, kind of target these operations managers rather than going straight to the executives, going that sideways influence into the company. And so some of the strategies that we'd like to do to implement that and to get these connections, and then from connections to sales, is well, we start with hiring some of those people, hiring some of those ops managers. I mean, if I'm selling you a product and I've had difficulties, in institutions that this product fixes, well, that just brings instant credibility. And so just hiring those guys as, bring them onto your sales team is really, is one aspect that I'd like to introduce. We're thinking about opening new offices. I mean, you've got to target the key sections here in Canada, in particular Vancouver and Toronto. Again, going back to targeting the operations MDs, I mean, a very simple and very cost-efficient way is through LinkedIn. These people aren't, advertising themselves, perhaps in traditional manners, meeting clients and the like, but they're on LinkedIn and places like this where they're easily findable, and that's how you kind of get your initial introduction, and then using, person sale-to-sale tactics, then you get the product out there. And then lastly, of course, industry events, so conferences. We got the National Mortgage Conference, I think, in Calgary, the Toronto, another conference. There's a series of conferences as well later on in the year in October, mortgage residential conferences that, if we send a team in there, sales team in there, these guys can get in, get the product across, get the idea across, plant in the mind, and again, connect with some of those managers. So I think that's, that's how we'd like to do it, just a little bit of visualization for you, I suppose, in terms of the green, new offices opening and some of the conferences then left and right, and making sure that we're in where the mortgages are, where the business is, and where we can, help out poor guys like me in the bank in the future. So.
Yeah, thank you, Oisin. So when we were looking at different solutions, one key part was, are we going to do this internally or externally? Who's going to do this for us? And straight away, I realised this is a system that I've even done within my own college course. We had an assignment last year very similar to this. It was more directed at chargebacks. So I knew that internally this would really drive the credibility of it. It would really trust the clients here and the customers, and less risk and more trust by incorporating this internally. And as well, we have the operational efficiency here. So we'd estimate that we'd be able to increase efficiency by 40 to 60%. And this would normally take about 30 to 45 days to finalise purchases like this. And the implementation of it all, so it'll be very customer facing with this chatbot. So the idea would be the customer would upload their information, right? And that information would go through our chatbot, and instead of these timeless features that the bankers would have to do themselves, it would run through the system, and the system would automatically take it off, and it would then be able to flag certain areas that the banker would have to go back to and flag themselves. So it won't be the AI bot confirming it itself. It'll be the banker taking it at the end, but it'll be integrated and a lot more effective. And if we look at the governance oversight layer, it records every decision. So even if we do want to go back to, even if we do want to make sure that everything is confirmed and correct, we can do this. It's stored for the auditing purposes and the model drift tracking, ensuring we have transparency and the productivity here. And if we look at the integration and the data layer, the API connections, look, APIs, it is a big risk having this incorporated through hacking. We know that is an issue here, but because we're also doing this internally, we're mitigating this. And the data will be encrypted to anonymize in line with the PIDEA. I'm going to pass you now on to Kate.
Thanks, Dylan. So, Oisin brought you through our sales strategy earlier. Obviously, this is such an important part because we need to be onboarding more clients. But for me, I think just as important a part is our post-sale strategy. We want to be continuing to keep on these companies, and even if we're keeping them on, they're getting more benefits from this. we can even use this then as proof of concept to get even more clients on board. So it's a win-win for everyone. So how are we going to do this? Well, it's vital for us to address all stages of the sales funnel. So Oisin some of you might be aware of Cotter's 8-stage change model. This is a really important model that companies can use when including change in their organisation. Whether this is a merger or a new technology, it's really essential. So Oisin brought you through how we're going to create a climate for change by onboarding these new sales clients. We're then going to need to engage and enable the whole organisation. So we're going to start here with the service implementation. So to address all stages of the sales funnel, it's going to be vital that we include the technology teams, the risk and compliance teams, and the operations teams. We're going to be doing extensive demonstrations and technical deep dives to make sure that all of these teams are on board on the same level and have the time to ask questions and really understand the system and the benefits it's going to bring into the organisation. Then we're going to look at engaging the organisation at wide. This will include practical workshops with all of the teams across the mortgage ecosystem. So we'll be able to really demonstrate the practical value this is going to bring to the organisation. Next, we're going to be looking at the ongoing operations. So we've looked at how when we're going into a new organisation, how we're going to set up, make sure that they're all on board with the new system. But what happens then the next year? Maybe this new novelty is worn off. They've forgotten about it, maybe started going back to how they were originally doing things. Maybe we've had hundreds of new hires come in this time. We need to make sure that everyone consistently is continuing to use this product. So this will start with annual refresher courses. We're going to continue with the workshops annually to ensure that everyone remains up to date. Even say, for example, Dylan was talking about a new update to the technology. This will need to be brought up to everyone using the system. We'd like to align this with the graduate program onboarding for these banks. A lot in our home country maybe start in September, but this can be done specific for each of the banks to make sure that everyone is aware of the technology. If new hires come in during the year, we'll have training videos included in their onboarding programs to ensure that everyone's up to date. Then last year I did my co-op placement in Apple and I was working in the operations team, but the system we used would work really well with this. So when we had different retailers that we were dealing with, we would have slots available for them to check in, maybe half-an-hour slots available through the day, that if they had an issue, maybe it was a new person joining the team, maybe it was a really difficult mortgage they're dealing with, for example. They'll be able to book in slots so that they can talk to the team, work through their issues. This is important with how Nesto Cloud was working already, to make sure that we can improve how the company is working and allow them to continue their own brand identity. Then we're going to also be looking at a targeted mortgage and renewal campaigns. Basically, this will be a co-marketing strategy with the financial institutions. So as we're aware of, as some of us may be aware of already, there's new regulations that have come in Canada. This means that it'll be much easier for lenders to switch between the financial organisations, and other regulations mean that there's extra renewal cycles, which will allow financial institutions to capture some of these mortgage renewals. So with this, we're going to be allowing our sales and marketing team to work with the financial institutions to ensure that all of their marketing campaigns include information on this technology and the maybe impacts this can have on the individual mortgage seekers. So this will allow us to communicate how maybe 40 to 60% of the mortgage approval rate will increase when Nesto Cloud is involved in the company, and it will also increase the mortgage uptake for those financial institutions. Finally, I'll hand you over to Ellen to bring us through our finances.
So these are just some of the financials that anchor our current growth strategy that we've put forward today. Looking at some of just the economic landscape Nesto is sitting in, their current process is saving reduction in underwriting time by 40%, which is a huge advantage to any financial firm looking to take on Nesto as a partner. Top regions for mortgage lending reinforce our decision to create new offices in the likes of Toronto and Vancouver, with over 44% of loan origination occurring within Ontario. We're looking at a estimated or targeted growth of around 180 million. This is in line with current compound annual growth rates of about 25%, 24.7% in line with the industry, and we are looking at a lender concentration of around 70% within the big six banks, which once again reinforce their decision to stay primarily in that market. Some of our core impacts and firm engagement lies within the current pool of people within Canada that are in this industry and looking for mortgages. So with 500,000 customers being served in Canada and $73 billion in mortgage under administration by Nesto Cloud, it just shows what kind of resources the firm currently has to push these targets that we're setting for them. The NPS score shows the customer satisfaction, shows just how efficient this is, which kind of allows us to set aside from the worries and reinforce financial firms why Nesto Cloud is the option as opposed to their other competitors such as ICE and Compass or Encino. We're looking at maybe around 10 conferences that Oisin had mentioned to look into Canada, with those major mortgage lending conferences and Canadian fintech conferences to be aiming for in order to hit our target demographic, as well as just the industry overview, where you can see, as I mentioned in the company analysis, the key opportunities that present the firm today, given the inclinations of the current demographic in Canada. With our budgeted expenditure, this is kind of just a small breakdown of what we're looking at. It's with the post-sale servicing, which is a key thing we're looking in order to retain customers and stay within working with Nesto Cloud. It's around $3,500 we're estimating around in order system customization, continued support and go live support, with working with the chatbots, working with people, and in order to set up these one-on-one appointments. Digital advertising is going to be kind of aimed towards LinkedIn, etc., and just to keep in order to reinforce the company's mandate.
So just to wrap this up, our solutions will allow Nesto Cloud to increase profitability within the next 3 years.
The presentation is up. Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer period. Friendly reminder, the Q&A period will only be 10 minutes long. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Maybe I'll ask the first question. If the firm were to adopt your strategies, who would own it in the firm? Who's going to run these strategies? And second part of the question is, you talked about a $6.5 million budget. Does that incorporate new hires, office openings, or is that over and above the $6.5 million?
So we're going to go to the financials first. These are fresh.
Sorry, if we're looking just at this is actually not specifically looking at office buildings. That obviously is an increased expense. We're looking here primarily at our initial targets. New office locations is obviously a big capital expenditure that is going to be going further down into the 5-year growth plan that we're looking at. When we're looking at these current costs, they're more so about the immediate things we can do within the 2026, 2027 target, with Kate looking to 6 new clients. The conferences, this is more of a lean budget. It's generous, but it's definitely targeted toward the more critical things to see results earlier on, and then look as these become more, as we see results from this, then take that and go from there to establish new offices.
Yeah, I think in terms of, you're looking at the organisational structure, and the firm's going to grow in that sense. There's kind of 2 components to that. One is, in terms of the sales team, I think that's going to be probably the larger part of growth. I'm kind of looking at perhaps bringing in those guys with more industry experience and bringing them in as the lead sales managers, and then bringing them into the branches in Vancouver and Toronto, kind of the cities where we want to target and grow. And then the other side is, the development, obviously with more clients, more onboarding, it's going to be more implementation, get more guys in to do it. Dylan can identify, you probably speak to this a little bit more, Dylan, in terms of we want to do it in-house, rather than outsourcing the management of it, for trust issues and the like.
Yeah, so in general, just confidentiality as well, having to bring in external sources it's a lot more complicated, and we'd prefer to have it all centralized in one location. And the system that we're looking at incorporating, it's not heavily coded. We have the resources there, so we don't see the reason why we would get it elsewhere.
Thank you. I'd like to bring up a topic that you didn't necessarily touch upon, which is the customer experience and the people, the Canadians that are getting mortgages. How do you see that the customer experience being impacted by the adoption of Nesto Cloud?
Well, I think we kind of touched on slightly earlier, with the new technology that we're talking about implementing, with the current banks that we're looking at, like there's so much paperwork that needs to be done behind the scenes before the customers kind of get their mortgage approval. So by implementing Nesto Cloud into the organizations, that approval rate will speed up so much. And there's also like additional benefits that they could be seeing here. Like the time could be sped up, but additionally, like the internal resources are kind of alleviated there. Like say Oisin was speaking about how there's so much of his time and work was put into this kind of tedious sort of paperwork. If a lot of this time was freed up, like who only knows the kind of other projects that they could be using. So that's definitely something that could be communicated to that company that they can then pass on to their customers.
I think in terms of customer experience, like it's for us at home, right? With the banks we have to deal with are chronic, right? Just in terms of the customer, never mind the bank itself and its own systems. But here, like Dylan spoke to it, with that kind of the chatbot that kind of automates, semi-automates that AML, the anti-money laundering element of it. The customer literally uploads the documents and the thing does it itself. Back home we have to go into the branch physically to get any kind of loan. If you want a new credit card, you have to go into the branch and you have to bring your ID, you have to bring your proof of address, your passport. So like the system, Nesto Cloud is just easier to use in that sense.
Question for you is a lot of your presentation is based on the recurring revenue stream. In terms of acquiring the new mortgages, which is going to be the most important part or the revenue part for the endeavor?
Mm-hmm. So I guess you have the two revenue streams. You have the operation side, the SaaS model, and you have the in 2 years' time, as per the project, you've got the kind of brokerage element of the business coming in. I mean, the SaaS is your core. Going forward, that's your core. Like when you start to enter brokerage business, it's easier to convince somebody to automate AML than it is to convince somebody to automate decisions. In terms of lending decisions, like I know my managers, for example, like if you showed them a yes, from an AI bot, they'd want to do it themselves. Just have another look themselves. So I think definitely that SaaS model element, is your core. And then when you build out those relationships, when I talk about when you go to those conferences or and you meet the ops guys, you get in and then you go across, and then perhaps from there you can go up into the brokerage business. So I think having that SaaS core element, and once you get that nailed down, once you get that relationship going, then you're talking about the origination fees coming in from the brokerage business. But I think fees are fairly strong, and Ellen has the finances coming off that. The revenue is decent in 2 years' time.
I think you spoke a little bit about the getting the sales strategy and how you would mobilize, but how would you structure or what key roles are there in the adoption of driving an adoption of the client's people into using the system and perpetually?
Yeah. So Kate's strategies are very important in that regard. So I'll just give a quick analogy from myself. When I was in the bank, and in particular, when Kate's talking about these training cycles are really important in that regard. But nobody really likes sitting through trainings, and once a year is a bit odd. And the issue is like when you have a high churn of low grade, low paid workers, which is the case in terms of the guys making the decisions in residential mortgages. It's not the $1 million paid bankers who will be there for 20 plus years. It's guys like me who are churning in and out, turning to different financial institutions. So Kate's strategies actually tie in. She had an element there that ties in with the grad cycle. So you try in the training time, that 1 year annual training in with the grad cycle. So it's continuously going along rather than being out of sync. You're looking at kind of trainings, that onboarding experience. I had a terrible experience because it wasn't like that. It was just one centralized training for everybody, and then nobody got it, and the managers didn't care because they weren't using it. So having those ops guys again, like having the people who will actually be setting up the system, knowing it is a big difference.
And it's so important to have those people who are working in it and who are passionate about speaking about it. Because I know all of us, they had to do onboarding training when we went on co-op, or I've worked in different companies before, and it's like you can be hours of just watching videos, and it says, okay, this is how you do this. You can just do that. That's fine. But then if you actually have people who know about it, who are passionate about it, speaking to you about how your work can be improved to others, how like so much kind of your monotonous jobs can be uplifted by this, and how that will then have such an improvement on your end customers. I think that's that'll just be such a huge benefit.
And as even just as per the brunch there, in terms of the post service, which is even as important, keep people using the platform, and budget in there kind of one-on-one check-ins, and actually revisiting the site, the team. That's something that never when they brought Encino into the bank there was no Encino person actually ever came on site. So it was you're getting to third and fourth mouth by the time you even learn what to do. I think that's one difference I think Nesto can definitely bring to the market.
Just a reminder, we have time for one more question.
Part of your presentation, one of the strategies was to go after medium to large size banks. Being a smaller company, they tend to have stickier legacy systems. So what's the pitch? What's the hook to get them to leave their legacy systems and, for lack of another word, take a gamble on something quote unquote new?
Yeah. Do you want to take it, Sir Dale? All right, Ken. Yep. So, well, there's two kind of key reasons. One is definitely the regulatory. I mean, the cycle is coming through at this stage where bank systems are 15, 20 years old. I know, for example, the reason the switch from my bank to Encino was regulatory. The lad said, come on, in fairness now, it's time to go from this one. That is the case here as well. I can't recall the name of the legislation was on the document pack in terms of upgrading systems and the like. And that's definitely going to be done now given the current crisis, climate and what's going on in the cyber world, AI coming in. So you've got that reason, and in terms of,
And also even like, for example, the proof of concept. If you can get this into one financial institution and make a real impact here, like you're then going into another company. You can say, well, it's undeniable. Look how this has worked here. It has had such an impact here. Why couldn't it have the same impact on another organization in the same kind of area, also dealing with mortgages? Like having that proof of concept, I think, is really essential.
Selling the growth story.
The question and answer period is up. Thank you, delegates and judges, for your participation. I will now ask everyone to leave the room so we can start preparing for the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
digital transformation partners, such as third-party providers entering into the space, such as Neste Cloud itself. However, the key question here is, how can you stay competitive and scale in the future in these upcoming years to come? We believe this is possible with our 3S transformation, by structuring, scaling, and soaring in the future. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa. Together with Team C, Kelly, Irene, and Hazel, we will be presenting to you a growth plan for Nesto Cloud as a digital lending platform. Here is what we will be going through today. To answer the key question of how should we grow Nesto Cloud as an ecosystem growth platform, and to answer these 3 key sub-questions on how to scale internal team structure, provide after-sales service, as well as secure B2B sales in the future. Now, with our structure, scale, and soar approach, we believe this can obtain 8 million increase of EBITDA by 2030 compared to status quo today. So let us take a look on where you are today. We know that Nesto Cloud is an AI-driven platform with a lot of features for end-to-end loan mortgage ecosystem. You're currently backed with various fundings through Series C, IGM Ventures, and other venture capital partners. And you're using these funds to serve more than 500,000 customers in Canada today. You also have the following business model, which is firstly software as a service by selling APIs to customers to access Nesto Cloud. And secondly, through business process outsourcing by providing outsourced and end-to-end mortgage systems. And here are your key revenue drivers today. In order, firstly is mortgage administrative take rate, and then moving on to mortgage servicing and internal Nesto Cloud implementation. We also know that you are currently focusing on major banks and credit unions in the future. But how can you evolve in the upcoming years to come? So let's take a look at the macro condition today. Currently, there are a lot of mortgage trends, but these are the 3 key things that we'll be highlighting today. The competition is very high to get the market share, as 65% of Canadian mortgages will be renewed in the upcoming year, and the renewal terms will get shorter with less than 5 years. There's also lower switching costs between providers, and longer mortgage duration from 25 to 30 years due to regulatory changes, and lastly, due to the rapid digital transformation accelerated with the open banking regulation. We also know these are the things that your clients are seeking, which are the mortgage firms. Firstly, they're looking at centralized data management, seamless API integration, as well as advanced AI capabilities. But of course, with these trends, also there are various key challenges, which include the build or buy hesitation from many firms, low switching costs, and as mentioned, data integrity trust from third-party providers, and as well as the insecurity of ensuring the post-platform implementation security. So with this, we understand that Nesto Cloud needs to make sure that you build a robust internal team structure to leverage these trends and address these key challenges. So now that we know the macro, let's look at what are your competitors doing. Based on the 4 key features, we found that Nesto Cloud is definitely one of the pioneers and leading in digital transformation. And you can leverage this to highlight your key value propositions of reduced operational costs for your clients, improved customer service, and seamless integration. Hence, you should make sure to ensure that these key messages are reflected in your sales strategies to stay competitive in the future. So let's go back to the key question on how can you structure internal teams, provide after-sales services, and secure B2B sales to grow as an ecosystem growth platform. So, presenting to you the 3S transformation strategy. Transform today for a brighter tomorrow by structuring, scaling, and soaring. Now let me pass my time to Kelly to talk more about how you can structure your internal team.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So now, as request on the case that Nesto right now only have 2 teams, the implementation team and also the performance team. But how? When you are going to serve a large amount of clients, how are you going to support the services? Or how can you communicate effectively or efficiently within these 2 big teams? So we think that an internal change management is needed for you to structure internal first and then to serve the clients. So in our internal structure, we'll build 6 teams, but it's not a large team. So let me go through what teams are there. There will be operations team, technology team, strategic sales team, risk and compliance team, legal team, and human resources team. But as mentioned, because Nestle Cloud already implemented a lot of AI, so we don't think we will be following the traditional workflow, but we will follow the AI agentic workflow. So here is how a structured agentic workflow to support your services efficiently and effectively. So first of all, I would like to introduce the AI agents. So AI agents can do a lot of repetitive administration tasks, can automate the codings, they can do data analysis, and also they can generate sales pitch documentation as well. So a lot of repetitive or manpower tasks can be automated. So these can be done by the AI agents. That's why you can see the FTEs here is pretty low. So the whole I think it's total around like 20 something. So your team can be very efficient. Then what the human will be doing? So for operations, they need to monitor day-to-day data analysis. They need to also keep track like how the AI agent is doing. For example, for technology, although the coding is automated, but for the UI and UX, the workflows, for the clients, they need to design it properly and tailor-made for the clients. And for strategic sales, although the pitches can be directly generated by the AI, but a lot of like we need the manual efforts to tailor-made for the clients. And this is not these tailor-made services can be done by the AI. And for the risk and compliance, of course, when we are looking for the red flags from the risk, we need to manually adjust and then doing a lot more communication between the compliance and risk team to execute the plans execute the mitigation plans. And for the legal, we can automate the contract lifecycle management, but how are we going to design the regulations and laws? This has to be done by the lawyers. So we need some people sitting in the legal team. And for the HR, the same concept as the legal, that we still need people to recruit, to communicate with the people outside. But as mentioned, the agents can already automate the contract lifecycle, for example, drafting the contracts or having the e-sign. So right now, why this is blank? Because this is the true way to make, by the change management, this is the true way to make efficient and effective collaboration and also having a full service supporting stream. So moving on to next, now you internally have grown. Then what should you do? Because we have mentioned that we grow your team for scaling your business. So it's very important that your business, your product and service also enhance their features. So we built a mock-up. And this is not the whole thing, and this is not really detailed, but what we want to show here is that this platform is a centralized data platform for our clients and each relationship management in the bank, they can have their own account. They can see their client's order. They can also see like the mortgage packages because different banks might have different mortgage packages and rates, so they can select it from there. And secondly, they will have a client relationship management here. So they need to monitor what orders are there and what orders they need to renew. So moving on to next is the renewal approval, which is a new feature. We want to make a customer life cycle. We don't want to leave the customers away. We want to attract them, retain them again and again. So there should be post-sale servicing here. So when we saw the renewal approval, it should be here. So when you click on the renewal approval, there will be the box here that tells you how can you contact the client and which email. Maybe he is not wanting to call, but he wants an email record. So you can contact by this. And also there is a chatbot here. Why? Because we use AI to optimize your workflow. Any remarks there, you can just type 1 or 2 commands to generate like the general remarks here. So the whole centralized data platform can help to enhance the efficiency and operational effectiveness for your clients as well. So this is a feature that we want to add, and we focus on how to maintain your clients, how to make your clients happy, and to have the win-win situations. Now, let me pass on to Irene to talk about how you're going out.
Now that we already have the extensive platforms enhancement and also the internal change management, we would like to be back to our roots on how we could actually attract the traditional banks and other credit union lenders to actually use our services.
Yeah.
So firstly, let's analyze where National Cloud is right now. Because currently, we understand that we are only utilizing the RFPs, which have several disadvantages, which includes lack of awareness from the other key players of the industry, and second of all, it requires much labor work to customize each proposals. And because of that, as Lisa also, my colleague Lisa mentioned in the very beginning, the goal is to sell the platform into the B2B market despite facing the competitive advantage and competitive landscape and also the key challenges in the market. So what's the missing point here? What's the gap that we would like to solve here? Is firstly, gaining the awareness from the key players in the market. And second of all, is to group each target into a segment group, which I will discuss further. So firstly, we would like to introduce more touch points other than the RFPs, because we understand that RFPs, solely depending on the RFPs, would not be a good sustainable for the future, especially noticing that there are more competitors in the market. So that we would like to propose to have more touch points, especially physical touch points in the market, which is through several fintech conferences and also several forums in the market, which one of the most significant one is the Canada Open Banking Forum, which is actually a big thing in Canada with more than 600 attendees and more than 20 plus partners with attendees from the big banks in Canada, including the other credit lending union members, which this will have an impact in terms of its credibility, awareness, and also its education side. And now we would like to do the account-based marketing, which is an ABM Lite, where it's a one-to-view market strategy, where instead of we focus on building a proposal for one single company at one time, we could actually group them based on their segment. For example, we can group them based on their AUM. So because as per our research, it's showing that similar AUM usually and typically have similar needs, and so they have similar, there's a lot of similar things that we can offer them. So that by grouping them into one group and create one proposal for the group, we could actually enhance our workflow even better. It's more cost saving, and in the same time, it's even better so that we could enhance our workflow even much better and more productive in the future. So after we group them, we propose the proposal, then we kickstart the meeting, do the follow-up, and do the relationship maintenance, as what Kelly has mentioned in the scale strategy. Then all in all, this strategy will have an impact in terms of its education, awareness, and all in all, it will generate leads and conversion rates. So imagine that you're a bank. So what especially when deploying and employing like third-party applications, what do you need to do? So you must want something that you can trust and something that you know really deep about what kind of the service and also products that they offer, which is why we would like to have the physical conferences, such as the Canada Open Banking Conference, so that they could learn about the Nesto Cloud service offerings even better. It serves of their education and also awareness, where the attendees are usually senior executive of the banks, where we could pitch the senior executive, which is much easier, especially we're doing the top-down bottom approach. So that we will also provide a follow-up meeting. Then we hope to generate them into sales, and we would like to have the lead generation. But what all this strategy without all the numbers, right? So I'll pass my time to Hazel.
Okay, thank you, Irene. So moving on to the implementation, we're gonna finish the majority of our preparation by 2026 and start rolling out our operations by the start of 2027. Now, what are some few quick steps that we can take as soon as possible to start rolling out these implementations? First, for the internal structure strategy, we're going to have a board meeting to have the stakeholders' approval for the transformation. Next, moving on to the scale strategy, we're going to meet with the existing team to discuss the service plan offering details. And lastly, for the store strategy, we're going to meet with the technical team for technical feasibility check.
Other than that, we have also discussed several other risk and mitigations, with the most notable one being data privacy concerns over AI usage, which we have discussed previously with Kelly, that we will have a legal team that help us comply according to the open banking regulations. Now moving on to the finances. With the implementations of the structure, scale, and source strategy, we will have an increase of $8 million in EBITDA compared to status quo by 2030. Now first, let's take a look at the cost of what it takes to implement our strategies. First, for the internal structure, we're gonna have a lot more people on our side, so we have to pay them, of course. Now, for the technology team, we have 78,000, and for all other employees, we're gonna have 50,456 for their salaries. Now, moving on for the scale strategy, we're gonna have extra costs for platform development, especially for extra features and also platform maintenance, as much as $15,000. And lastly, for the source strategy, we're gonna have a $2,500 for the participation fee for the Canadian Open Banking Conference. Now, with all of these costs and the implementation of our strategies, we're gonna have a 20% year-on-year growth of users, which will help us reach a $62 million EBITDA by 2030. Now, that is how, with the structure, scale, and source strategy, Nesto can grow into an ecosystem growth platform and also stay on top of the mortgage lending competition. Thank you.
The presentation is up. Thank you, delegates. We will now begin the question and answer period. Friendly reminder, the Q&A period will only last for 10 minutes. The timer will start whenever you're ready.
I can start. Sorry, I can start. I have a question regarding the 20% year-over-year growth of users. Yes, that is reflected by the implementation of how many banks, for example, or how many clients do you predict being onboarded onto Nesto Cloud to then drive this revenue growth?
Yes, so from our research, we have discovered that credit unions have a 20% year-over-year growth of users, and also for the mortgage lending industry, and that is what we base it on for our users' growth, and that is how we implemented it into the volume banking and also the banking volume and also the growth in users.
I can add on to that. So when you ask about how many clients onboarding, I think because there are a lot of different companies and also different banks, it depends on also how large is the bank, because if the bank is larger, then the implementation rollout will be longer. But because our implementation plan is 3 years right now, so we hope that we will get at least 1 to 2 big banks on board first, and the other mortgage companies in the future. For the mortgage companies, there will be more than the banks. So, but precisely, we don't have a number right now here, but we have estimate the worst case and best case scenario based on what we have here.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll follow up 2 questions. One, who or how will that ABM marketing strategy kind of roll out? Who's going to have the ownership of that program to turn leads into new customers? And going back to your cost slide, am I assuming the ads for number of employees and all the 20 people you want to bring in, that's more like $1 million spend? Was that per person that you had on your slide, or right? So it adds up to about $750 million. Okay.
Okay, so to answer your first question about our ABM marketing approach, which is actually a part of the ownership of the ABM approach would be a part of the strategic sales team, which is all about doing the research on like the AUM and how the different needs of every different banks and also every different companies will be done. And when the strategic sales team would already have like the groupings, then they would actually leverage it to group them and to provide to make the proposal according to their needs. And
the second question regarding about the salaries, currently the
Nesto team already has 2 different divisions, which also we have been paying them salaries. And for the second part is that we want to allocate these status quo salaries to these different divisions. And from our research of the average salary in Canada, we have discovered that for the technological team, it's going to be more. And for the sales team, it's going to be 50,846. And we have also come into consideration that we're not going to be having as much salary costs because we will be also integrating AI to streamline our workforce.
I wasn't prepared to go right
Oh
now.
no, I can go if you want.
Yeah, go ahead, go
Certainly
ahead.
ask another one. So you brought up, I guess, a technology application talking about renewal features on one of the pages, where you've linked it, I guess, to a CRM system or something like that. Again, I would ask the question: where will that responsibility or kind of ownership lay? Will it be again in the strategic sales team? Will it be like who's going to be watching out for that?
Okay, so just to clarify, you mean like for the renewal features,
Yeah.
the stuff? Okay. Yes. So I think in this part, that will be because building this feature, building the system at the back, there's also data, right? So the technology team comes in, the operations team might comes in as well. It depends. For example, technology team, they need to build the logic. They need to understand where the button should be put, the UX flow, and also maybe in the technology team, there are some people doing the UI. They need to know where this platform. And for the strategic sales team, they are doing like more like teaching your clients to how you can use this platform and system. So mostly the strategic sales team, they are also doing a lot of implementation. So in traditional way, usually the strategic sales team, they don't help to implement. They only sales. But right now, because of the AI, because a lot of like repetitive work, documentation has been done by the AI. You don't need to put a lot of man hours in it. That's why the strategic sales team will have more capacity to help on the implementation. And they also will be very familiar with the system because they need to sell the system, so they can also do the implementation side. Just now I also talk about the operations because the operations team is helping internally the communication as well. So for example, how to bridge the technology team and also the strategic team. So I would say overall, the new way of working would be the collaboration within the team at the back. And different teams are also helping on each other, even on one feature.
Question then, for like once you have the system implemented and everything like that, how do you keep the usage adoption fresh and growing?
Thank you for your question. To ensure that the usage adoption is, continuous and, it doesn't end at like a one-signed contract, that is where our client relationship management team comes in. So it's part of their job desk to ensure that it's to close the loop and make sure to keep contacting if they need any additional services, keeping it up with post surveys, maybe might invite some of them for, a quick catch up, for a quick call. And if there are any additional feature updates, which I believe will happen in the future either way, they will be the first one to know, understand new service offerings provided, which is essentially a continuous agile loop of development. So that is where it comes in. That's why we have a specific strategic sales departments, which kind of does CRM to ensure that all of their clients have up-to-date information and make sure they're open to the option to subscribing to new services in the future. And in addition, it's definitely also opening new pipelines as the SOAR strategy as well to tap into new potential customers through the various conventions. So that's where the loop continues to run, and you can
have ease of this concern of having one single time contract.
Just a little bit, slightly one point to add on is that in the traditional way we usually do one-off contract, but right now we want to do like a in different phases. So, for example, in the first stage of the investigation, and then we go into the design for implementation, and then we then do the real implementation. So after the real implementation, we don't stop there. We have the post-surfacing. So we hope to hear about the feedback from the client as well. So we engage them by this cycle. We want to keep them in the engagement loop so that the clients is coming back to Nesto.
So because it's something that you triggered in me, the ownership of the post-implementation and its perpetuation is in the strategic sales? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So, but it also depends. For example, if the post surfacing is a little bit more technical, it's about the data, it's about the logic that the client doesn't really understand how it works, maybe we have to loop in the technology team to help them further. So it will be still sitting on the strategic sales in terms of like the client relationship, but if the feedback coming in is really technical, then we need to get someone from the technology side.
We have 30 seconds left if you guys have any questions.
I'll maybe ask one more just to, bringing on 20 people, I think was part of you gave a timeline of about a year. So how are you going to manage bringing someone new on every 2 weeks? 52 weeks a year, divide by 2.
Yep. So this requires a lot of work in HR, but I would say the first thing that we can go to the recruiting firms that are recruiting a lot of IT people, or those who are specialized in these cloud companies. So we'll go there first and to find out the HR, and then to recruit the other people.
Perfect. The Q&A period is up. Thank you, delegates and judges, for your participation. I will ask everyone to leave the room so we can start preparing for the next presentation. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Schwartz, angel investor and corporate director.
Mark Rundown, business transformation professional with podcast.
Buying a house is arguably one of the most significant experiences in an individual's life. I know for myself, I've spent so much time thinking about this. The layout of my house, the kind of gadgets I'll have in my kitchen, and yes, I absolutely have a folder in my camera roll for those gadgets. But in the current Canadian economy today, these feelings towards buying a home is not as exciting as it once was. With increased interest rates and decreased trust within the market, consumers now are facing the barrier of what they want to do moving forward. However, your organization, Nesto Cloud, has the ability to rebuild this gap that we're seeing through use of trust and transparency with your clients today. Today we're going to be looking at how Nesto Cloud can leverage their offerings to connect internal and external factors to those growth demands in order to increase their market share today. Now before we jump a little bit further, I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Bella and I'm joined by my colleagues Bijan, Daisy, and Subhan. Now, diving a little bit further, we're going to be looking at some key tasks for you, starting with being able to develop that internal growth structure for you and being able to define those roles moving forward. Additionally, defining a strong B2B sales strategy to reduce the challenges that your organization is currently facing. And finally, creating a post-sales service plan for you and for your clients with our strategy of the Nesto negotiation. A two-pronged approach, first focusing on that effective awareness with a pre-sale marketing campaign targeted towards your clients in order to increase time efficiency on the projects that you're currently seeing. And secondly, expanding activity, a post-sales servicing plan targeted to better support your customers following that transition with a key impact of 2% increase in those originations in the fintech industry. Now, with that, I'll pass it off to Subhan.
Great, thanks for that lovely walkthrough, Bella. So as the first part of our analysis, what we wanted to look at was more from a macroeconomic consumer perspective as to what's actually occurring with the traditional lending arm, which has been largely banks, which accounted for 65% of traditional lending in 2024. What we see is that consumers are shifting away from large banks for three key reasons. One, there's strict stress testing. Two, there's higher interest rates. And three, there's a stern lending criteria, which ultimately leads to the key impact that 1 in 3 mortgage holders are considering alternatives to these traditional lenders. And this all comes at a time when regulations also remain supportive of this shift. We recently saw the OSFI announcing that uninsured straight switch renewals would no longer require qualification, lowering the consumer's friction to switching their actual mortgage lender. So market analysis indicates that banks have been losing market share in the mortgage origination space. Now, at the same time, this provides a growth for alternative providers, such as a company like yourself, where alternative lending market is projected to grow at a 13.5% CAGR through 2029. About 56% of mortgage holders are exploring refinancing options with different lenders currently, all at a time where over 2 million mortgages are set to renew from 2026 to 2027, where borrowers will be looking for better rate. So the industry is moving towards alternative lending at a time where a large mortgage renewal base is set to emerge, leading us to the key takeaway that consumers are switching from banks and looking for more mortgage services from alternative providers, and that's where we really want to focus our strategy.
Now, diving a little bit further into that, starting off with those traditional banks as one of your key consumers. Well, looking at that market share, as Subhan mentioned, they're currently looking at that 65% market share. Additionally, looking at product saturations, companies such as RBC are currently doing what your organization is being able to provide, so collaborating with them is not ideal for your organization moving forward. Pushing a little bit into growth opportunities, we see that decreased demand with increased loan interest rates have caused them to look away from banks, similar as Subhan mentioned again. Diving into those alternative lenders, well, they're currently making up about 9% of the market share. However, with their capacity, they're not able to really use the offerings that you're able to have based on their current state. And finally, they have a low client base for you. So looking towards those growth opportunities, this is not necessarily a market that you really want to be looking into for a future consumer. Next, those fintech companies. Well, they're currently seeing an 8% of all mortgage originations, but they have the ability to develop similar products to what your company is doing right now. Therefore, their product saturation is not ideal for your company. But moving a little bit into those growth opportunities, again, that low client base as we saw with the 8%. However, looking a little bit further into those credit unions, well, they're in about the middle of the pack with 18% of all mortgage orientations in 2025. They have that untapped market for a product similar to yours right now, and we're seeing a 20% year-over-year growth in those originations, which is a huge opportunity for you now. That leads us to the key takeaway with that based on the current consumer market, Nesto Cloud must shift collaboration efforts moving forward to reach strategic growth goals. I'll now pass it off to Bijan.
Perfect, thank you, Bella. So now we wanted to take a look at the current sales funnel and sales strategy that your team is pursuing. First, we'll take a look at the awareness, where we see your head of mortgages, we see a meeting with your team and the head of mortgages to discuss the value of the software and how it drives growth. Secondly, the interest piece. So your team the client will have a meeting with their head of mortgages and the rest of their C-suite and their stakeholders to discuss that current value. Next, we'll look at the consideration. Your head of mortgages team will then trigger the institution's formal RFP process. Fourth, we see that intent with relevant stakeholders providing the your company will go in and provide those demonstrations with all current stakeholders. Fifth, we'll see the evaluation, where the operations stakeholders will then evaluate the platform internally. And finally, we'll see the purchase, where the entire team will be on board with the process, and then we'll see that phased rollout. However, within this process, we see two key points where we want to expand the operations and increase efficiency of what we're currently seeing. That first piece being the awareness, and the second piece being that evaluation stage, where we include all the operational stakeholders, and we'll talk about more about what that looks like in the implementation. But our key takeaway here is to increase efficiency in the current sales strategy. These are the gaps that need to be filled to increase speed, as well as keep that transparent trust within the company that you want to provide the service to. So with those three analysis tools being mentioned, we would love to introduce to you our strategy, which is the Nesto negotiation. Our first prong, again, is that prong to increase the effective awareness, which is a pre-sale marketing campaign targeted to increase time and efficiency on projects, and secondly, the expanding activity. Now with these two prongs, we're not here just to talk about some idea, but we are here to take the problem of today into tomorrow's opportunity. And with that being said, I'll pass it over to Daisy to talk about the first prong.
So first we need to look at our consumers, and specifically the businesses that we want to target, those credit unions, and we need to understand them. So first we've dived in a little bit into where they're lacking. So we've noticed that regional banks, they've gotten a head start on that automation. And we've noticed that right now we're stuck in the past with credit unions. They need to catch up. Another thing that we've noticed is that 75% of these credit unions operate on legacy systems, which is something that we really want to leverage when we are doing our marketing campaign towards them. So what we need to do is we need to understand their values. We understand that they value community, they value their members, they value trust, and they value that personalized service. Therefore, what we need to do is we need to frame our campaign as the next step towards providing their members with increased satisfaction, trust, safety, risk and compliance, and again, that automation that they are lacking. So, first thing we need to look at is we need to increase our website. We've already taken a peek at Nesto Cloud's website, and we've noticed that Nesto Cloud has a very diverse offering of what their services look like. However, what we do think we are lacking a little bit is showing the process mapping of what it looks like so that those credit unions can better understand the process. We need to have a value proposition explaining exactly what they get out of it so that they don't have to have that first contact through a form. We want to make sure that whenever they are booking to have this meeting with their C-suite, with their members, they are understanding 90% of what you guys do before you've even had that first meeting. You want that first meeting to be a handshake deal. You want to understand that they are happy to explain this to their members because they already understand before they've sat down at that table. Next, what we'd like to talk about is making sure that we have a partnership playbook, making sure that we have value proposition within every touch point, making sure that we have we explain the relationship that we are building so that we can create that trust from the get-go. So understanding that we have creating relationships with the Canadian Credit Union Association, making sure we are building those established relationships, and making sure that all of our RFPs are data-driven based on previous success stories, so because they are risk-averse. And finally, what we'd like to talk about is providing resources. Credit unions, especially a lot of the smaller credit unions across Canada, have limited access to resources because of how their regionality. Therefore, what we'd like to do is we'd like to increase some small, tiny service offerings so that we're able to have stronger working relationships with them. I will expand on this shortly, but we want to do this so that we can create more post-purchase services so that we can continue to have those reliable relationships working with them. So the key takeaway here is that we want to make sure that we have a lot of knowledge built up with those relationships prior to that first meeting. So now I'll pass it back to Bijan so that he can quickly talk to you about why we want to expand our efficiency when we're coming to that evaluation portion.
Awesome. Thank you, Daisy. So now we touched on the awareness piece, and now we want to look at the evaluation. So what is the strategy? Well, we want to increase the speed of the sale process, but ensure that that trust still stays within the client. Now, being a first mover is fundamental because you can decrease the amount of time it takes to run the demos and run your entire sale process with different areas of management. And what this actual strategy is have an evaluation of the product with all of the operational stakeholders in an initial meeting. And that really helps develop on the awareness that we're showing in that first prong of our piece. And what the added value is again, it allows for trust to be shared amongst everyone immediately and decreases the back and forth conversation between the levels of management, thus increasing the speed to implement. So what are the steps in this new process? Well, one, the initial meeting includes the operational stakeholders, where they're evaluating the current process and how the technical demo addresses your current pain points in the client. Second, an RFP is then submitted showing interest. Third, the regulatory and compliance checks are completed. And finally, there's an official team purchase which includes a phased rollout. So the completion of this, again, allows to fully remove the process to run more demos and evaluations later, making it more convenient for not only your company as Nesto to not having to go back and forth, but again, it makes it more convenient for the client. Perfect. And now I'll pass it back off to Daisy to go into our second problem.
So now I'd quickly like to expand on what we mentioned earlier with implementing a couple extra resources for those credit unions. So first I'd like to talk about offering a bit more integration with our platform. So as of right now, our software as a service is an option that they can choose, and what we would like to do is we'd like to offer more integration services. So as of right now, credit unions, as somebody who currently uses a smaller credit union for my banking, have not amazing app services. So what we think we could do is that we can have a team that we would hire to be an outsourcing team to help with the implementation of our services and platforms into their apps. Now what this looks like is a continued partnership for maintenance, for implementation, and once again, it provides us with an extra revenue source with our mortgage servicing revenue. So what this would do is this would create more risk and compliance regulation, and this would help us maintain a working relationship, and this helps us take a little bit more of the burden off of those credit unions so that they can have a bit more trust in us, because we're going to make sure that we are placing their needs first and we can ensure integration and compatibility with all of our platforms. Now, next we'd like to do is we would like to increase customer engagement with Nesto Cloud. So how we would do this is through, again, with that website redesign, we would have an added portion which has a lot of information based on mortgages within Canada, just so that we can expand on how Canadian trends are working. We can, again, explain our value proposition, and we have options for interactions with those consumers, so that then we can have more of a pull network marketing trend, so that then we can have consumers are now seeing Nesto Cloud's name more often. We can have more SEO. Therefore, now you're going to see more marketing share, so that you can increase that marketing share that those companies would want to work with Nesto Cloud, because now they're going to see a list of companies that we partner with, that Nesto Cloud partners with, and therefore now you're going to have more incentive for those companies to want to work with them, because the customer is seeing their name more often. And final, we would have more continuous educational awareness. I'll expand on this, but this is again that change management, ensuring that companies have continued access to supports for their employees, webinars, showing how the system is used, and the process mapping of the services. So again, showing the change management, ensuring that the change is happening with our employees rather than to them, ensuring we're using the ADCAR method, which is increasing awareness of what the change looks like, making sure that there is desire from employees to know more, to understand the process. We're ensuring adequate resources for the knowledge sharing, ensuring that employees have access to those webinars, access to those resources, access from their managers. Again, making sure that there is action, so ensuring that they understand that they can ask for help, understanding that if they have any concerns, their concerns will be taken seriously and into account, and again, reinforcing the need for change. Now, the tools that we have to support this is making sure that we have the phased rollout, once again with the demos that Bijan mentioned, making sure that everything is happening in phases. We would make sure that we have tailored role-based training tied in with our champions of change, rewarding those who take a step towards implementing this change, making sure that they are the people in the office that others feel they can approach to ask for questions, and rewarding those who take that extra little step of leadership. These are the ways that we think we can see the most success, and the impact is making sure that we have entire buy-in from our team and supporting those credit unions with the lack of resources that they may have.
Great. Now, thanks, Daisy. Now, I understand we've covered a lot for you today, so we wanted to make it a little more digestible by breaking down what necessarily tomorrow's steps are, and what some of the more long-term steps look like in terms of a timeline. Now, the first part that we want to attack is, again, that building awareness. So begin with the additions that we want to see made to your website to, again, increase the user engagement that you see. The second is building awareness by hitting the partnership playbook. The third is increase awareness to resource-limited CUs. The fourth is by changing the current sales structure to decrease time and to purchase and increase trust. And last is the additional software team and ongoing resources to fully optimize. However, the key first task that we want to outline for you is again, building awareness starts tomorrow with a meeting with your executives, and expanding the actual activity will begin in 2027, which again aligns with the actual financial forecast that you provided. Now, on the note of financials, we took a quick revenue build assumption based on understanding it from your estimated users projections and applying our own internal estimates that we forecast our implementation will generate. So in the base level, you had about 2,400 users in the year 2027. We project about a 5% increase that we think we can see continuously into 2030. And what we did was we backed out what our implementation fees revenue per users were, and through that delta capture, we were able to realize that revenue actually ends up increasing by a significant portion into 2030 than what it did in our base case assumptions. Now, to end it off, to give it back to Riz, I'll pass to Bella.
Thank you so much. So looking at some of those risk mitigations, we know with any solution there are some ones that we have to highlight. So we've highlighted 2 key risks for you. So the first one is going to be looking towards more of that testing with the current plan. And our mitigation for this is to be able to give clients that preliminary access to your software moving forward to test how they feel well incorporating it into their services. And second, staff feeling overwhelmed and reluctant. So now we know a large part of your organization is that staff piece we saw on your website, the Meet the Team, and how engaged you continue to be with them. So we know this is a big part for you, and as well for the clients that you're going to be servicing. And our mitigation for this is to be able to integrate that phased rollout throughout. So this is not just within the beginning, but there are going to be more questions that come up through the duration of your services moving forward. And we want to be able to make sure that you're able to mitigate that continuously. And we can see that likelihood and impact shifting down towards that low risk area, which is something that we want to see throughout moving forward. Now, I know that we've went over a lot for you today, but looking towards that key problem that we mentioned in the beginning of how you're able to look at those internal and external factors as you push forward and be able to integrate your product into those streamlined services today, we've highlighted through the negotiation nesto that currently credit unions are the best opportunity for you to do this moving forward. Like I mentioned earlier, Canadians are looking for something that is sustainable for them, and with those increased interest rates and the decreased trust in the market, we see that banks are currently no longer the option for you moving forward. We know that you want to provide a service that is based on the service of trust, reliability, and access to everyone, as having a home should not be as difficult as it currently is in the current state of our economy. Now, moving forward for you, we would love to talk about this a little bit more throughout the question and answer period, but I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. The presentation is up. We will now begin the Q&A period. Friendly reminder, it lasts for 10 minutes, and I will start a timer whenever you're ready.
I can start. Thanks for the presentation. I understand that we're going to be switching our strategy from focusing on big banks to moving towards credit unions. How do you project that we'll be able to manage the implementation of, let's say, multiple credit unions rather than just maybe one major big bank? We have to consider that big banks have market share in Canada. They have visibility by all Canadians coast to coast, whereas credit unions are a bit more regional based. What's the plan for implementation? Working with multiple stakeholders in many different credit unions versus just maybe one large bank.
100%. So the main thing that we wanted to project here is that we are worried that if you continue to stay with those big banks, that they already have the resources to build in-house. Therefore, the choices here may be that we need to adapt to ensure viability in the future market. But to answer the second part of that question is to ensure that we are, again, we may have to look at a little bit more hiring, making sure that we are keeping our staff adequately within their limits. But once again, you being able to use those strategies that you've already gained from working with those big banks and just understanding that you are working with clients who are, they have smaller resources, it's smaller steps, it's just integrating with their technology, which may not be at the same level as yours. So it's just understanding that you may have to take an easier approach and approach it with a bit more of a community focus.
Just following up on what my colleague said, usually the members of a credit union are usually very community oriented. They like to see somebody, they want to see the advisor. How does this presentation incorporate that movement to a digital platform for helping the clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the number one thing is that the fact that your organization offers two distinct products, one being, again, that fully integrated software as a service, where essentially they don't have to have no interaction with the lending team, or B, the more personalized aspect, where a credit union can hold on to their existing lending team, and they can still maintain integrity with those face-to-face interactions. However, what this does is it makes the back-end job a little bit easier. So once that initial meeting is perhaps over, that touch point is gone, what ends up occurring is that a lot of the back-end work, the underwriting process, the credit checks and stuff, that can be streamlined without necessarily losing the actual face-to-face client interaction that the lending team does that they pride themselves on so much.
Can you maybe take me through, you had one earlier slide that talked about awareness starts with the CEO or the heads of mortgages, and then you had a slide later on that says speed things up, so by the time you want to get to presentations, you've got every facet of the credit union in the room. Can you take me through what steps will be needed to accomplish in between those two big leaps? And then secondly, I just looked at your financial slide pretty quickly. If the idea is the credit unions are going to be a much better growth opportunity for Nesto, why would you have 3 years of flat revenues of $31 million on a SaaS platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So, excuse me, I can walk you through that first part of the question, which is how we can have that transition between those steps that we laid out. So currently what we're seeing is we're seeing that gap. We're seeing too much time being taken in between the head of mortgages and then the rest of their VPs and the operational stakeholders. But the way we want to mitigate that is to, again, bring in those demos and the evaluation frameworks at the beginning of the process. And our strategy here really tackles that because what the current processes are is that there is that awareness piece in that first meeting. We want to remove that awareness piece and have that awareness through our first prong of our implementation, where they're gaining that knowledge before even going into that first meeting. So what that does is that decreases a little bit of that sandwich time or conversation time of going back and forth, and mitigates opens up the opportunity of having everyone at the table at once showing these demos, showing what that looks like within their company. And one of the things that we actually talked about was where we can actually give the client more on-hands a framework of maybe a preliminary kind of software with maybe some parts of it maybe taken out for the process of it, but maybe give it to the client for a little bit of time so that they can test it themselves internally and see if that's best fit for them. So just to summarize that there, and then
yeah, and I can walk through the part on the financials. Basically, essentially, we built it out originally two ways. The first one was essentially looking at it from the lens of if we're adding additional users each year, what ends up occurring was we saw a good bump, but we wanted to be a little bit more conservative. And I know the projections your company were originally providing was actually holding the number of users flat, as well as the actual revenue you were generating from 2028 to 2030 flat as well throughout the projection period. So what we essentially did was we applied a 5% flat growth to your actual projections each year, and then we held it flat to give you more of a base case assumption on what actually ends up occurring. So this ends up being a more conservative estimate on what we believe the revenue looks like, or we believe the actual delta capture based on how many people we can get to actually convert and join the platform could be significantly higher.
My question pertains to post-sale servicing. So you had a slide there where you talked about the software team, the consumer engagement on the Nesto Cloud website, and then the continuing education awareness. Can you walk me through what kind of team do you need to be able to support all of that?
Absolutely, yes. So right now it depends entirely on whenever we're capturing those clients from the credit unions is understanding what they need, because we don't want to be providing things that they don't need. We don't want to be forcing it down their throats. They may be, once again, as they are regional, they may have smaller teams, they may not want some of these resources, but offering these resources is our hook. It's how we want to make sure that we are building those relationships. But depending on what they need, we want to be flexible to be able to understand, how many software developers we might need. Being able to update our website, as an example, we don't know if that's a team of 1 or if that's a team of 10. We need to understand where we want to project. As a good number, I would say that you'd probably want to, for every around 10 credit unions that you're trying to onboard, you'd probably want a team of 4 developers to help with those apps, to help with the maintenance of those apps going forwards. And it also depends on if you are helping them with, trivial maintenance, or if it's, a bit more hefty of a integration with your platform and continued servicing.
And I guess the follow-up I have for that, it's with my colleague over there as well. He mentioned that the credit unions are a bit more regional, more people-focused.
Yes.
How do you, what's the human component of your change as opposed to the website?
Absolutely. So what we're trying to do is just trying to make sure that we are making it easier for their executive team. We do not want to cut out any of the interpersonal activity happening between members and their C-suite, between them members and their credit unions. What we're trying to do is just make it easier for those executives to make those decisions. Keeping the transparency with their members is key, and this is how we think that we are actually able to create that efficiency with those steps, is because in that first initial meeting with credit unions, you're more likely to have more than just the head of mortgages. You're more likely to have, membership representatives. You're more likely to have more executive members within that meeting. We think that's how we can actually really hit the speed in our process, because specifically of the target demographic that we are reaching, and of course making sure that we're highlighting the community values that we want to project on our website through our engagement with consumers and through our engagement with other businesses.
Yeah, sorry, if I just might add just really quickly to that originally there. Now we're proposing the shift towards the actual credit unions at a time when we're seeing demand for mortgage underwriting from them skyrocketing quite a bit. So a 20% year-over-year growth in the mortgage underwriting, and now they command an 18% market share within these originations. So we're not necessarily saying that we want to come in and remove the human element. We want to come in and make their jobs a little bit easier, so ultimately they can service more clients more effectively, ultimately helping them increase their brand awareness and be able to help the people in their communities that they actually take care about.
We have 1 minute left, if you guys have any questions. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we now ended the Q&A period for the last team. Judges, this is the end of the first head-to-head matchup. I will now wait outside the room for the next 20 minutes for the deliberation period to begin, where you'll decide to allocate 15 points between the 3 teams. May I remind you...
No, 24 points. 24 points.
I believe they changed it for
That's
me.
okay. It's the updated number is 24.
Yeah.
It's 24.
There's only like 3 teams.
I will confirm. I need some clarification. So it's 24 points between.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna copy it. Cause
Okay.
yeah, you got the.
This is
there's
the last
special
version? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So the 24 points divided by amongst the three schools says the minimums and maximums
Yep.
on there. And you have 20 minutes. When 20 minutes will come get that sheet with the final numbers.
Okay, thank you. The feedback for these two groups comes when?
After the 20 minutes,
Okay.
we're gonna take the sheet first, just so it's like
Yep.
unlocked, and then we can go tally them up.